Hello and welcome to the Car Kernel channel, and welcome back to our 600,000 mile project and a video that I'm super excited about. Today we're going to start the detail. You notice we are not in the shop. We are at Chicago Auto Pros with Jason, who is going to really take this to the next level. And there's one promise we're going to make. This will be one of the craziest detail videos you will ever see on YouTube. It's a combination of a mechanic and a really good detailer, possibly one of the best out there. So let us get set up, let us get started and talk about the plan right after this. So here's the plan for this car. First, Jason really cleaned this car. I can imagine before getting into his shop, we don't want this disgusting car to be in here, but we're gonna not just take some seats and some covers and whatnot. We're gonna tear this interior completely apart. I mean, everything is gonna come off, dash, headliner, everything. And this is the image in our head. This is how we're kind of imagining this is gonna look like. Yes, it's gonna go that extreme. Folks, this is a lot of work. We're gonna put you on a big time lapse and we're gonna talk about what we're doing, what's going on. Let's get started. So grab lots of popcorn and some snacks because this is gonna be a big one. So we start with the door panels because I remember when we did a door repair on this car, one of the door locks didn't work, in case you haven't followed the series. One of the door locks didn't work and we took the door panel. I looked inside, it was like covered in mud and just all kinds of stuff. So I wanted to take the door panels out, and another thing we wanted to do was the window on this particular window, the passenger front window, was not an original glass. It's been replaced at some point with a non-original one. Now there's nothing wrong with the glass, but I really dislike it when you walk to a car and one glass doesn't match the rest. So glass was not expensive. We went this far. I mean, at this point expensive is not a thing. And here's that blown speaker. This is just a gift that keeps giving, and I wanted to replace this glass. Here's that new glass. It was actually a used glass that I got off of eBay. It's just a glass. Found one that is from a clean car. We're installing it here, and we are gonna do something with the glass later to celebrate. You're gonna have to stay toward the end of the video to find out what we actually did. There's nothing wrong with the glass, yes, but we went this far with this car. It wouldn't hurt to put an original glass, and I really wanted to clean the inside of these doors. You would not believe how much debris actually ends up in this door, and it contributes to the smell of the car. Now the glass is pretty simple. On most Toyota just has two bolts, comes right out, nothing really special about it. Just line it up, tighten the two bolts of the regulators like you see here, and life is good. I repeated the same process on all four doors because there's something about doors, that kind of rubber seal that you see, is actually a vapor barrier, and I wanted to inspect them and see what condition they're in, because if they're gone or deteriorated or somebody's been in this door, I would want to replace it because that contributes to a lot of the inside humidity control. Believe it or not, this particular tour that we're taking right here, I don't think it's ever been apart, because that vapor barrier that you're starting to see here, that's never been apart. Usually these, when you remove them, if you're not super careful, they rip and they get destroyed. And actually one of them did get destroyed. I'll show you that when we get to it. We ordered a new one with the tape, the black tape that you see around it. It's called butyl tape. The one thing I have to say about, as we're removing this and as we get deeper and you see the scratches on that door panel, which is something we want to fix, this is an old car with a lot of miles. I mean, every panel I remove, we remove it at the risk of something breaking. This is just the reality with cars that are this old. This was the one that got ripped, so we ordered actually a new one. We'll get it installed when we assemble this car. But the surprise was every single speaker was blown. Even though they sounded okay, I knew the subwoofer was blown, but every single speaker was blown, and that was the kind of the part of tearing into a car like this. The more you tear into it, the more stuff you find and the more you have to do to it. But something about Lexus of this era, and had to have to be said, Lexus used to overbuild cars. I mean, everything was overbuilt. Every panel that should have 2-3 bolts has 6. That's just how they did things back then. They make fine cars today as well, but they're not overbuilt like they used to. This is why, to me, the LS430 was one of the last cars that was severely overbuilt. The only car that kept going after that was the Line Cruiser. But as we wrap up this, we start on the interior. These door seals, the inner door seals I'm actually replacing, except one of them is actually on national back order. It's not available. I believe it was right rear side. We're going to have to reuse. This interior and everything about it, it's just so old and overbuilt, and everything has 17 clips. We're finding this little wooden panel. I was so nervous about it. I was telling the guys we might have our first big casualty, but it came out, and this is what we call Jason's violin. If you watch his channel, you'll know what I'm talking about. So we start by removing the glove box. This is standard dash removal stuff on older Toyotas. There's a lot of screws and bolts. We look at newer stuff, they'll have 1/3 the amount of bolts that this has, and this is a double glove box that comes in one piece. And as we start into it and kind of look around, see what we're going to remove next, I started with the same thing on the other side, and there's an approach to doing this kind of removals and this kind of jobs. You start with a lower dash panel. That's what we're removing right here, like where the glove box was, where this thing underneath the steering wheel is. That's a lower finish panel that exposes a lot of screws for the center console, and that's what we're tackling. There's a specific method to removing interiors. It's not random. Sometimes it seems random, but it's actually not random. You always start lower finish panel, center console, radio, center stack, and then you kind of progress from there. So that's what we're doing here. The lower finish panel, we've removed it before, but still it was fighting us because there's a lot of bolts and there's a lot of stuff, and this is how they used to build these cars. At this very moment, I'll tell you my thought. I've been in that lower finish panel. I knew what we were going into, but what I was not looking forward to was the center console. Believe it or not, center consoles in cars, just from my experience as a mechanic taking them apart, it is the dirtiest part of a car. This is a part that you would not believe how dirty it gets underneath. The outside it's fine, but underneath it just gets very, very dirty. Removing these old wooden panels, they're not real wood, but they do have a veneer on top of them. Very tricky because they're very brittle. All the plastic is brittle. The wood is, everything is just, you have to really handle it with care. And it looks like we're kind of being rough on the panels. We're not, but some of these are really stuck, and you really have to gently pry things and pull them out. Nothing actually, I was pretty surprised that nothing broke here. I was expecting casualties here, but so far so good. But casualties are incoming. There's no way around it. Now, once I pulled this, I looked underneath and I'm like, oh my God, this is 10 times worse than I anticipated. There was so much debris in that center console that I could not even see where the bolts were. And some of the bolts were not, didn't want to come out, especially when we start getting into the hidden bolts. And then this is where we had our real first casualty. So there is a power outlet, a cigarette lighter inside the center console there. It was just on there. And sometimes when you work on older cars like that, you have to make a decision. We're going to sacrifice something because something is not going to come off. Do we sacrifice the small thing or do we sacrifice the big thing? I was faced with this decision. Are we going to sacrifice that whole center console pocket, possibly trying to undo the power outlet, or are we going to just sacrifice the power outlet? Believe it or not, at some point in this video, I paused it and I went quickly to the parts manual to see, and this was where we're cutting it, to see which one was more expensive. Of course, the power outlet was the lesser one, so it is the one that is sacrificed. I just have to cut it to save the center console. These are the decisions you have to make when you work on cars. More hidden bolts. They're not really hidden, but they're covered in debris that you couldn't even see them. So with the center console out, this is where we I looked at everything and decided, made an executive decision, I guess, to pause the dash job and move towards the carpet. I felt like if we have the seats out of the way, we would have more space to work with the harness, because the harness wraps underneath the carpet in some areas, as you'll see it in a little bit. So I started by removing the steering wheel, which is kind of standing in the way. This has a very old school airbag. The newer cars don't have airbags like this anymore. And then we removed the column covers. This is an old school Toyota product or Lexus. You have 3 screws, most newer ones have two. Some of them don't even have any screws anymore. Then I wanted to remove the spiral cable, or you call it clock spring. So if you turn this freely or want to remove the steering column, it could get damaged. So I figured, let's remove it. And in the way, here comes the turn signal stock, which is also an old school way with two screws. Newer ones, they just have one clamp or they clip on. Even the spiral cable, the clock spring, had screws holding it, which was kind of interesting to see. I totally forgot that we're working with a very old school, and this is the worst design in the planet of the LS430, removing the temperature control switches. They literally just sit there, and there's no way to pry them from the back. You have to very carefully pry right next to the dash and be careful not to damage it. Not the best idea in the planet, but the reason you do that is the radio bolts are right behind it. I removed the switches, then I wanted to remove the entire bracket. Normally there's two 8mm bolts on each side and you remove the radio, but I wanted to remove the entire bracket, so kind of went towards the cluster. This cluster has two clips, pretty simple. This is a very DIY thing to do to remove the gauges. Just a few screws, couple clips for that bezel, and it comes right out. Here are these screws getting removed. Pretty simple. This is basically every single Toyota, even newer ones, they're the same way. Takes 5 minutes to remove it. It's not a big deal. Once we got that out, I was able to straight access to the two 10mm holding the screen, and then we already took the tools at the bottom. So now the radio comes out. This is actually their radio itself. And then the navigation screen is actually separate. It comes with the vents. These vents that are auto-oscillating, which still work on our 600,000-mile one, which is good. Then we had a fight here and a decision. That vent technically should come out, gives us a little bit more room. It would not budge, and I did not want to break it. So I decided to leave it for later. We will remove it once the dash is completely out of the car and I can access the clips from the back to compress them by hand. But these are the decisions sometimes you have to make. The pillars were an interesting thing. Newer cars will have a little flimsy plastic clip. This had a metal clip, which was extremely hard and heavy duty to pull, but it came out without damage. And this is just a reminder how just overbuilt these cars were. Every clip is metal. Everything is just bolted on with multiple bolts and multiple screws. Nothing is flimsy, or something common with newer Toyotas. That little flimsy clip loses tension over time, and then the pillar cover kind of hangs down. At this point, we were full on headed towards removing that very not nice carpet. It was extremely dirty. So we started with the rear seat. By the way, removing the carpet on a Toyota or Lexus product, not a very hard job. You basically have to remove the seats, some pillars around it, whatnot, and the lower finish panel. Usually that comes off. Believe it or not, 2001 LS430, that's not really very highly optioned. It does have heated rear seats. These were the connectors we disconnected. Remove some of the trim here. Again, more door seals we are replacing, except the right rear one. We cannot find it. It's on back order. Maybe it'll arrive one day, but we'll have to reuse it. Then the extremely heavy seats, even though this doesn't have cooled seats, but still they're very heavy. These seats came out, and a lot of surprises underneath them. We'll show you that more as we go. But lots of connectors for these seats because they still have a side airbag. This was the early days of side airbags in the seats, and you have the controls on the side. It's a very heavy seat, this one. And the other thing is the seat belt. Seat belt is actually attached to the seat itself. This is something newer cars don't have because safety regulations. It's not the best idea in the planet, but that's how it is. Then the pillar covers, the B-pillar covers here. One of them, I was able to find a new one. It was actually inexpensive considering what it is. But the other one is unavailable, discontinued, so we're going to have to repair it and do our best. Leave that to Jason. Seatbelt was very interesting. So this has a power adjusting seatbelt, and they have a very strange star-style bolt, that's nut that holds the seatbelt. So I had to remove the whole mechanism with the motor and everything to remove it. That was just easier. Sometimes you go out of your way a little bit for the sake of not breaking something, and that's what we went here. Seatbelts came out. I wanted to clean them. We'll probably at some point send them to get rebuilt. I was able to order one, actually. I wanted to order new seatbelts because they were really bad. But the one that showed up was black in color. I guess they don't make this ivory color. And that's the other interesting thing about this car. The ivory color is very rare in the LS430. Most of them were black. Some of them were ecru color, which is lighter than this one, and the ivory was kind of a rarer color in this years. Now we remove the gas pedal, which actually bolts on top of the carpet. This is a very old school throttle by wire system. This is very interesting to see this pedal. Newer pedals don't look like this because this one is bolted to the floor. And it's a very interesting mechanism. But we got that, and with that, we are almost about ready to remove the carpet, just kind of loosening it. It's clipped onto a few places. And even this one, this is a real carpet, not like the newer cars where they have just a thing that assembles a carpet. This is a very thick, heavy carpet, and that's why I felt like we could save this one and kind of bring it back to life, because it is real carpet, has very thick insulation underneath it. And here's that carpet coming out, and there is so much debris. And I do apologize if this disturbs some viewers, because this carpet was not clean. Obviously, this car has 600,000 miles. Things will happen. And even those vents, I have totally forgotten that these vents were bolted on the LS430. This is why I told you, these cars are overbuilt. Nothing is just clipped on. Everything is bolted on with real bolts. And many of them, I mean, this vent in any other car is just bolted there. Here's that carpet coming out, and yeah, it was not very pleasant because we were trying to keep the debris in it, to not leave it all in the car, but at the same time, we're trying not to leave the debris in Jason's shop floor. So that was pretty tricky, but here's the carpet out. Let's go check it out in a live video, and we'll come back. So it is lunchtime. You see what I'm telling you when I tell you this car was disgusting? I mean, the things we found here, some of them we're going to show you, some of them we can't show you. Yeah. This is the carpet. Seat's very comfortable outside the car. It even becomes a reclining seat. I like that. Well, this is the carpet. It is disgusting. There's no other way to say it. Not just dirty. Dirty, I understand. It's an old car, but yeah. I mean, you spend that much time in a car, you put this much miles, it's gonna happen, and I understand. But let's look inside the car, because actually there was a small surprise. The first one is, if you are missing a Game Boy Wild something video game, we have found it. It is safe and sound. Slightly dirty, but safe and sound. Here's the interior of the LS. It's actually, once we pulled the carpet out, I was surprised. It's actually not, okay, it's really bad. Let's not sugarcoat this. It's not as bad as I anticipated it, but here it's really bad. But as you come outside, it's pretty dire. Some of you mentioned on the pine needles that maybe this was a flood car. Folks, this is not a flood car. You will not find a flood car that looks like this. The pine needles are right there. And really on the, like near the footwell, maybe they got in the car with a lot of pine needles, or they parked it where it made it through the AC. That's my best guess here. But the center console situation, that is a situation. I mean, it's not pretty. Let's put it this way. Of course, that's the place where you put coffee, and I see a coffee spill all the way from here, all the way back here. So now I don't feel like this was a just overkill for the sake of being overkill, that we took all this apart, and we're still going, we're not even done. So here's what we got left. This is the dash as it sits right now. It's, I want to say 75% down. There is an option in this Lexus, because this is an older Lexus, this part of the AC box actually comes out as it sits right here. I can pull it out, and if you see the heater core, actually, you can replace it without pulling the whole thing, which is pretty cool. We're actually trying to get one, because that stuff you can never clean really well and get it smelling right, and I don't want to risk it. But the next thing is, I want to pull this dash in one piece. That means the wire harness, the bar, and the dash pad, all attached, all in one piece. And when I say we're gonna try, because this is, remember, a 22-year-old car. Things are not gonna go always as you wish when they were newer. The only casualty we've had so far, one of the cigarette lighters broke. There was no way to get it out. It was just on there. So otherwise, we have one vent that is fighting us, but I'm gonna leave it till we get the dash out, then we'll try to extract it. So we wouldn't break it because it has wood around it. But things are going well. We're gonna head out to lunch because it's hot, dirty. We're gonna head out to lunch. It'll be 2 seconds for you. It'll be probably an hour or so for us. Let's get back to work. Well, we are back from a very nice lunch. Light lunch, because we're still working. I actually changed direction again. I wanted to completely finish the back because the dash was... We were kind of saving the best for last, and we wanted that to be almost the last thing. So I started with the back seat, and the back seat on the LS430 is actually... It looks very intimidating, but it's one of the easier seats to remove. I possibly have removed every single possible seat configuration in Toyota. Probably the LS460 being one of the, if you have an L with a bench, like a moving seat and whatnot, it will be the harder one. But this one is very simple. Actually, it's easier even than a Camry one. This doesn't have the hooks that Toyota loves to use. This actually has bolts. It is, again with the overbuilding, it has bolts bolting this seat down at the bottom and at the top. And of course here we started heading towards our possible biggest casualty. So the seat belts have a little hook at the top, and that hook on the LS40, because it's overbuilt, it is clipped on. Every single other Toyota model, even newer Lexus, the seatbelt will just unclip, and it's very simple. Here, you had a clip on top of a clip, and it just kind of becomes one giant assembly, and there's no way to unclip it without breaking it. I'm trying to be really careful with it, not to break it. So at some point, I reached the decision, you know what? We're not going to break this. I do not want to add more stuff to fix, and these parts can be very rare to find. So I decided to unbolt that entire bracket that sits, and of course there was no room to access. And I think this is where the heat, all the stuff we're dealing with was starting to set in. I figured if we pull the seat back a little bit, we're going to have better access to these screws. There's actually 3 screws holding this tiny little bracket. So again, with the overbuilding, that's how they did this. I don't think I've ever seen an LS430 with these seatbelt guides that are broken, but here's those coming out. I just kept them there. That's the best way to preserve a seatbelt. And then the other side as well. And we will pull the seat back. And lots of debris underneath the back seat, but not as much as I anticipated. I imagine this car didn't have a lot of passengers in the back most of its life. I mean, 600,000 miles of full passengers is possibly not the case. But here's that out. We pull some more trim, and then the next LS430 special, Lexus Overbuilt Special. So the pillars in the back, in most cars, will just have clips. Nothing really special about it. This one has one metal clip in the front, so you have to loosen the whole thing and then slide it for that metal clip to come off. And of course here, actually what I was telling Jason in this exact moment is I'm going to try to not leave my fingerprints all over the place, because yes, we are cleaning this, but we don't want to add more to it. And that was... these were very heavy duty. I mean, usually they're little flimsy piece of plastic. This is kind of carpeted. It is really thick. And then we move towards the package tray. This is what Toyota calls a package tray, in case you're not familiar with this term. So the third brake light was stuck, and this is where I should have probably unclipped it from the trunk, but I didn't see it, so we had to go underneath, undo the seat belts, which are, again, they have a lot of bolts and a lot of brackets. I mean, this was really an adventure for me as well. Possibly I haven't gone this far in an LS430 before, but everything is extremely overbuilt, and everything is very high quality. I mean, this is over a 20-year-old car, and everything is coming apart beautifully. We did have some casualties, but any other car that is this old, you're going to have a lot more casualties, and this is coming apart very nicely. And look at that thick insulation right there. This insulation was just... This is why these cars are so quiet, by the way, if you ever wonder. You'll never find this in Camry, Corolla. You'll only find it in some Lexuses, but the LS430 had just a lot of it. And you'll see a lot more of that as we go. Here's that passover opening coming off to the trunk. This doesn't have a full folding seat, so it's not a thing in the past. And then remove the rest of the seatbelts just so Jason would have easy access to them, because these seatbelts are also dirty, and this color, you just look at it, it gets dirty. So 600,000 miles later, things will get a little dirty. It's much easier to clean them outside than in the car. And I wish I can replace all the seat belts, but unfortunately some of them are not available, especially the backs, definitely not available. But we got these seat belts out, and then I wanted to move towards the subwoofer. I know the subwoofer was blown. I actually have one. We were going to replace it anyways. This is the easiest way to remove this subwoofer. You have to remove the package tray because it's bolted down underneath it. You can't really access it. You can cut at the package tray, whatnot, but that's not a good way. Then my least favorite part of the entire thing. I mean, this place was so full of debris. There's cigarette ashes, there's coffee spilled over, and add to that 20 years plus and 600,000 miles. Things were not pretty. I mean, I can't even find the bolts for things because they're covered with debris. And then the overbuilding here got a little out of hand. You actually can't remove this shifter unless you lift the car. So we have to cut and then go underneath, lift the car a little bit on the side, jack stand and whatnot, undo it from the transmission underneath the car, then the shifter would come out because this doesn't have a shifter cable, it has a shifter rod. Then we move towards, now we're going back again to the dash removal, which starts with the wire harness. I want to get some of these wire harnesses out of the way, which there is not actually a lot of harness in this car. As much advanced as you think this car is, it's not a very big harness. Modern cars here will have a bigger harness and has a lot more stuff. But again, everything is very overbuilt. I love that about this car, and really appreciate when you start working on it, you start to appreciate why this car lasted 600,000 miles, because everything is so well built. Now, at this point, I only have wished that the repair manual was also as well built as this car is. It was not. Because literally in the repair manual, at some point in the dash removal process, which I reviewed, usually review it before we go into a job like this, it really tells you remove connectors. That's all it tells you. It doesn't tell you which ones, what do you have to remove. So you kind of have to experiment as we go, because they don't tell you. And these vents also are bolted down. Usually these are never bolted down. These are the floor vents, which go from the HVAC box down. At this point, I'm kind of figuring out very nervously which connectors we need to remove and which connectors we don't. Usually you end up removing more connectors than you need to, which is a good scenario. You never want to pull a dash and be tangled by a connector, and now you're hanging in the air with this heavy dash in your hands. But you try to remove as much as possible. I took some pictures just to know the routing, because finding pictures in the repair manual for older Toyotas and Lexus, yeah, it's not going to happen. They don't even tell you what connectors to remove. They just tell you disconnect connectors and be on your own. Now, I started working towards removing that blower housing, which I was very happy there it comes off separate. I did cut a long part. We probably spent an hour on one bolt. Not the best location, but it's okay. It came out. I'm going to actually attempt to assemble this differently when we go back, but that bolt was very difficult. It was at the top, and yeah, that was not as simple as I hoped it would be, or as the repair manual shows it. But we continue on with the harness. We're pretty much done with that side. Now this side, I figured the steering column at this point was kind of in the way, so I wanted to head towards dropping it down. Start removing some of the harness here. Harness on the driver's side in these cars is a lot more complicated than the passenger, because you have the steering column and the ignition switch and all the stuff that goes on there. And then there's a crossover harness that comes from under the hood into this area. So I'm kind of here trying to figure out what belongs to the dash and what belongs to the car. So when we remove it, we're not damaging things as we pull the dash, because you want to make sure. I wanted to loosen the dash a little bit just so I can move it, because some of the bolts were behind it. And this is where things started to get a little intense. And I'll remember one comment from Jason. This was the point where I can see it in Jason's face. This is getting a little too much, perhaps. And I actually paused at some point while working it. So Jason, at any given point, if you feel like this is getting a little too much, we can pause and re-plan this. But I was committed. I was, at this point, I mean, there's no going back. We're going to tear this car to its basically the kind of way that they are assembled. That's how I wanted this to be. So we're dropping the steering column here, getting kind of ready to remove this dash. This dash can come out separate, but it's extremely difficult because you have a vent that is stuck. I'll show it to you in a bit when we go back to the live video once it comes out. But basically, we ended up going with the dash removal and the bar, the reinforcement bar, and the entire wire harness behind it. And of course, that is a lot easier said than done, because as much as you want to disconnect every single connector, you will always forget something. That's because they don't give you any directions. You're just kind of going at it and using your experience and your eyes. So at this point, we got the dash ready. It's that one bracket on the side actually very nicely cooperated and came out. It makes it much easier when these bottom reinforcements are out. When you remove the dash, you don't have a lot of overhang at the bottom. But the other side, of course, was a lot harder because the bolts were facing the wrong way. So I got the dash here. We're trying to get the reinforcement bar to disengage from the body of the car. Of course, as soon as I finally got it disengaged and pulled the dash, we realized that we had a bunch of connectors that we did not disconnect, and I didn't find that out until the dash was like basically out and hanging. And then I saw them, so now I had somebody hold the dash from the other side while I lean underneath it, disconnect them, and then there was one wire remaining, which was actually an option wire that went nowhere, but it was just clipped on. So I had to disconnect that, and then the dash came out. And Jason was really happy at this point because things were getting a little intense here. So we're going to go to the live video. We're going to check it out so you guys can see it outside and everything, and then we'll come back. So we have gotten this far, and this far is very far. So the dash really fought us because I wanted to remove the dash alone, then the bar with the harness. That was not possible because the vent that went here, which I actually have a piece of glass here, that's very interesting. It got caught here by a harness and there was just no way around it. So we had to remove both, and then some of the wires got stuck, and it was just fun. But we're almost there. It's coming along. We still have the AC box. I think I'm going to remove the steering column out completely so they have full access, because I'm going to attempt, and I say attempt because this is a lot more difficult than it looks, to remove this very last layer. There's a lot that has to come off for that, but we're going to attempt it, see if I can pull it off. We don't want to take Jason's complete day, although we're almost at the end of the day here. But now we come to the very unpleasant part. Let me show you what is the unpleasant part. Do you remember early on in the series, we took off the heater, we installed new heater hoses, not took them off. We installed these new heater hoses. Well, now I have to take them off again. And do you remember how difficult that was? It was very, very, very tight. So wish me luck. We're gonna get back to it, and probably gonna pull the AC box, pull the last remaining odds and ends, and the last thing will be the trunk. Actually, I forgot one more thing important. Headliner. That should be simple. And now that I said it, it's not gonna be simple, but we're committed. There's no going back now. We drove this car this morning, and now it is the furthest thing from a driving car. Let's get back to work and we'll see where we go. So there's something about mechanics, and I have to admit this, never anticipate how the job is going to go, because it always never goes the way you think it will. Removing the hoses was pleasantly simple. Removing the headliner, that was going well until it didn't. Well, let's start along. The thing about the heater hoses is you can't just grab a plier and kind of manhandle them out, because then you bend the pipes that go to the heater core. And if you bend them, it doesn't take much for them to crack, and then we have major issues. Because I actually checked on these pipes. I initially wanted to replace them, but they are not available. We can probably find used ones, and another part came up after I removed them, which was the overbuilt part. The seal that kind of seals the interior from the outside, in every single car, it's just a little rubber grommet. It just clips on, and that's it. This one had a metal bracket that holds the rubber piece and 2 bolts. That was just another special thing. Same thing on the AC side. Here we're removing actually the AC lines, because when you remove the AC box, there's a heater core in there, there's evaporator in there, so there's AC lines and heater hoses going there. So that was actually going pretty well. There's actually the cable for the control cable for the valve, because this has a coolant valve for the heater that also comes out with. But that was going very well. Then we went back inside the car to remove the few bolts, which is a very, very happy moment here, to remove the AC box, which came out relatively simply. And one huge shout out here, I forgot my knee pads, and huge shout out to Matthew, Jose, and of course, Jason. They were super helpful with this. You will spend so much time trying to look for a tool, go back and forth, and it was really helpful to have them there. They were very nice to volunteer their Saturday to come help me with this project. But here we are removing, again, continuing on the messiest part of this car, which was the center, underneath the center console. We go back to this. So I'm trying to remove that center insulation, which was a very thick insulation right here. And we had to make a decision here. I had to actually make a cut in this insulation. Would have loved not to do it, but unfortunately we don't have access to the lift there, and the car is already disabled because everything is out of it. We can't really move it easily. So I had to make a relief cut here to get past the parking cable. Because removing the parking cable, you have to go underneath the car, pull it out, and it just kind of opens a whole different territory. So I decided it's my car, it's not a customer car. I will make a small relief cut to be able to remove this insulation. It's not going to affect anything. It sits underneath. We will tape it up later with some insulation tape, and we're good. This was very, very dirty area of the car, and at this point I wanted to remove the steering column completely out of the way, and it's very simple at that point. Just comes right out. We start with the headliner, which things were basically what I told Jason at this point. Hey, this will take us 10-15 minutes because all we have to do is remove some handles. They're all beautiful bolted down handles. They don't have flimsy clips or whatnot, visors, and then the whole headliner will come down and we're good. Well, that didn't exactly go, and especially when I removed that top console there's some ash, like cigarette ashes that came down and some debris. I was surprised how would we get debris there, but we did. It was pretty interesting to see that. But what I really love about this car is the visors were bolted down. There had 2 bolts, and even the little hook. Newer cars have some weird clip that goes in, and the cover pushes the clip out to hold it. It's so flimsy, extremely difficult to reuse. This one had all bolted down, and I really appreciated that. And this one has a real headliner, like with fabric and foam and everything. Newer cars, they don't have that anymore. Even you look at your nice Alcantara from a newer car, it's not as nice as this. This is a real headliner from old school cars that it's just a beauty to look at and work with. Very easy to get dirty though, so we're trying our best not to get it more dirty than it already is. But removing the handles was simple. You basically have 2 bolts holding each handle. They all came out. Things were going very, very smoothly here. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And speaking of the tunnel that we're sitting in, that insulation behind the dash was, we pulled a little bit of it back. I did not see any debris behind it, so we decided we're going to leave it alone. Jason said he can clean around it, and he thinks we don't need to spend another 2 hours tearing into it for nothing. But here things were going very smoothly, and you notice the handles are coming off super easy. 2 screws, comes right out, very simple. Until we literally got to the very last bolt, and I did cut it in the video. The bolt would not come out. I mean, we had to fight it. I had to beat a socket on it to get it out, and this bolt is not available separate from the handle. Of course, the handle is long gone, but I was able to get it in the end. After a lot of trial, I cut a lot of the video here, but we got it. That was the last fight. And of course, this headliner has clips, Velcro. And some people will think, wait, clips and Velcro? Yes, that's how headliners are held, because the handles are what holds it up, not really it doesn't have any bolts holding it. It's just the components hold it and some Velcro and clips. Most cars don't even have the Velcro. This one did, which was a little scary to remove. Headliners are very tricky. You can easily crease them and damage them. And the only way to remove headliners out of cars is out of the back door. Just like you see right here. This is actually the official procedure. They're designed to fit through there. Very carefully, you got to remove them. Then we started with the what I call the snake, the side curtain airbag. We'll show you that when it's outside the car. Again, what a beautiful design. The newer cars will have flimsy clips that always break, and you can never reuse them. This one all bolted down. Very simple. Took us 2 minutes each side, and it's out in one piece, without a fight, without anything. I remember doing the last complete teardown I did was probably a 21 Highlander with a headliner. It was not pleasant to remove these because they had clips, and they were one-time clips, and they were extremely difficult. You end up just breaking the clip and getting a new one. So bolts were a welcome thing. Then the sunroof. The sunroof was pretty interesting because I was actually debating removing the sunroof or not, but when I saw the debris, once we started looking at the edges, it's like, yeah, we're definitely removing this. 4 sunroof drains. You can see them very clearly. I disconnected them at the beginning here. And basically a bunch of 10mm bolts, and the whole structure comes down. Now, it might appear like I am disconnecting the sunroof and it's just going to fall on my head. Actually, that's not the case. I leave 2 nuts, and they're designed like this, where you remove everything but 2 nuts. And these were the installation nut. When you install the sunroof, you remove, here we are removing those. This is what holds the sunroof completely, and then again comes out through the back door. That's the only way it'll fit through. And let's go back to the live video. We're done. All right, Jason, where are we going for dinner?
Red Lobster.
All righty, let's do this. Well, I think in this case we don't need seatbelts, but you should wear your seatbelt. Guys, it's out. This is how a convertible should be.
This is nice.
Wide open. This is probably how a Jeep would be, like a Willys Jeep. This was a lot of work. And I feel like you're going to need to detail your shop after you detail the car, because this thing is up there.
I got tired just watching you do this.
It's a lot of work, but we got it done. Well, should we give them the tour of the damage?
Absolutely.
Well, this is the car. This is the dash. We got the AC box. We're actually going to take the AC box with us because I'm going to change the evaporator. I'm going to change the heater core. The blower motor also is getting changed. This stuff not worth changing or cleaning. It's never going to come out right. Hey, it's cleaned up pretty nice here.
Yeah,
almost can't tell that it's dirty.
It's better than it was already.
It's very dirty. Let's go check out the car. In case you haven't seen an LS430 with this interior next to it. Here's how that looks like. What do you think, Jason?
It doesn't look like much of a car anymore.
It's little fender bender that'll buff right out, right?
Yeah. No, it's amazing how, how much the dirt and hair just gets in everywhere, and being such an old car, that's a lot of the smell. Like, you can clean the outside of it, but it's still from like everything in here.
This is every time I have tore a carpet down on a car or did a headliner or pulled a dash. The car was very clean, it was just detailed, but when you pull stuff out, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, and that's why I wanted to do this with this car.
Yeah.
I'm also curious, because this is not something you do every day. Is this gonna really smell completely different?
I think it will. I mean, I think we even looked at the door panels here, and it's wet, and there's stuff growing in it. I mean, everything, just it's everywhere.
A soggy mess is what we're gonna say this is. Hey, the roof is clean. That's one plus, but still you see there's this mold hanging off of here, and I mean, it's impossible. Some of this stuff is impossible to clean with everything assembled. Even if you disassemble a few things, we can never get this far. But we got it. You're the man for the job, brother.
Extreme detailing.
Even though I didn't cause this mess, I just kind of inherited it, but still embarrassed with you, man. I'm sorry, it's a mess. But if there's anybody that can pull this off and take this car to the pursuit of perfection that birthed it, it is you.
Yeah, I'm excited for you to come back and see everything all clean and put it back together.
I can't wait, brother. I can't wait. And guys, I'll show you one thing. Look inside the car. This car has been in an accident, I know about that. Do you see the signs of the spot welds right there? Can you even see it in the very back? It's very clear that this car has been, because usually they'll paint the outside, but they'll never paint the inside. That's how you can see it. But I don't think it's a good idea to, if you're buying a used car and you want to check if it's been in an accident, to tear it down to this level to see if it's been in an accident. It's not a good idea. There's debris all over the place. Let's go show them that headliner. That was pretty interesting. So in case you haven't seen it, this is a headliner out of a car, and this giant snake-looking thing is the curtain airbag. There's 2 of them, and then that's over there is the sunroof structure. I actually pulled it with the glass. Normally, I don't do that, but We're so behind on time. We kept Jason here all day long. So I just decided, let's just pull it like that. We can always separate it. And the amount of debris here, Jason.
In the track, it's crazy.
Check this out. If you get him a shot of this. Look at all this stuff. There's so much debris in here. It's unbelievable. I think that's because of the drains.
Yeah.
Like all the water runs down.
Opening up, pushing all that stuff back in there.
And add 600,000 miles to that. We'll get here. Mm-hmm. Guys, we're super excited for this. We have more casualties. We should probably show them the speakers. So this is a subwoofer. I knew this was completely blown, and I even bought one. But yeah, they're all pretty much completely blown here. So we're gonna need new speakers. I told you guys, there's never finishing a project. You always just new things come up and keep going and keep going and keep going. But we're committed. I think if if this doesn't prove we're committed, I don't think anything else would. Guys, subscribe to Chicago Auto Pros channel. Check out Jason, not just for this project. He's an awesome guy. He really knows what he's doing, and just the stuff he makes and the magic you do, it still amazes me. I just fix cars and make them dirty, and he does his magic. So check out his channel, check out all his other videos, check out the progress on this car on his channel, and then when we come back, we're hopefully coming back in a week or so to see the new car. I'm going to call it the new car because that's what it's going to be after all this. We're going to put it all back together. You guys will see that. So in the meantime, thank you so much for joining us in this rather long video. And until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day. So I got the aftermarket glass out, and with Jason's permission, we wanted to smash it with a hammer. We're gonna do one better. So how strong is an aftermarket glass from an LS430? Let's find out. Apparently very strong. That was not what we expected. Let's try that for good measure one more time. Is it gonna break, smash it on the ground, or we're just gonna grab a hammer and go for it? That worked. So we have glass all over the place. Jason, I told you we should have done this outside, but let's get back to work.